We're thrilled to see all of you this evening to talk together about this year's selection, Celeste Ng's Everything I Never Told You. This starts a month long of events that we're hoping to see you all at. Those are listed for the most part on the back of your pamphlet, with the exception of Celeste's visit, which will be October 27th at the Pierce School. In her book, Celeste's characters face many challenges, some of which we're going to discuss this evening in chasing expectations, bias, identity, and the pressure to belong. Before we begin, I have to thank a number of people who made this event possible. Trustees Karen Livingston, Reggie Healy, and Karen Tryon-Lowy. Our Assistant Library Director in the back, Ann Reed, as well as the incomparable Hank Philippi Ryan, who's part of our programming committee and the Brookline Reads Committee, who isn't here tonight but is preparing for the release of her new book, What You See, on October 22nd, so we're all excited for that. You have a couple of pieces of paper on your chair. One of those is just to ask you where you heard about the event. We're always curious about where people come to these from, and we'd love to get your input on that. So if you don't have a pencil, Karen will bring you one if you raise your hand, or there are some in the back. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator and our panelists. I'm sure you all recognize Reverend Liz Walker. She's the pastor of the historic Roxbury Presbyterian Church. Before that, though, she was the television news anchor on WBZ-TV. She's done more than 12 years of humanitarian work in war-torn Sudan, where she helped build a school for girls, which was one of the first of its kind in the region. Reverend Walker has been awarded honorary degrees from a number of New England educational institutions, including University of Massachusetts in Dartmouth, Boston College, Simmons College, Salem State, and Bridgewater State University. She will be joined on the stage this evening by our three panelists. Many of you who are fans of the library will recognize Robin Brenner. Robin is our teen librarian. When not presenting programs, she's very active for various publications, including she's the editor-in-chief of the graphic novel review, No Flying, No Tights. She moderates a variety of panels and is on a number of awards committees for young adult literature, and she's really a key presence in the library, keeping the vibrancy of our teen room and teen program here. Next to her is Nadia Chamberlain Foster. Nadia has 20 years of leadership in healthcare, public education, and higher education. She's the executive chair of Steps to Success, which is one of the key programs I'm sure that you're all familiar with in the Brookline school system that helps support underprivileged students there. And I'm sure she'll talk more about the program's mission as we go through things tonight. Nadia's volunteer and civic involvement spreads across Greater Boston and includes a 2014 appointment to the Massachusetts STEM Governors Advisory Council, which is also of particular interest given the themes of this evening's book. And then finally, Chris Chanya-Sulkett is the Human Services Specialist in the Brookline Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations. She's a town meeting member, and she is part of various research programs. She sits on several boards and commissions, such as the Massachusetts Asian American Commission, the Commission of the Status of Women, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Regional Health Equity Council for New England, and the Executive Board of the American Public Health Association. She received her bachelor's from Boston University, her MPH from BUSPH, and her PhD from Northeastern University. So please join me in welcoming Reverend Walker to the stage and welcoming all of our panelists. Thank you all very much.
Good evening, everyone. I am delighted to be with you this evening. If you will forgive me, I am in the midst of a power surge. I believe that's what they call it. It will calm itself down in a moment. I am sure there is something this book can tell us about that. I apologize for being a little late, and I think that has to do with sometimes chasing expectations of our own and trying to be at too many places at once. It's impossible to do that, so I'm delighted to be here, especially with this esteemed panel. I thought we could start by kind of talking about the book. Let's go in the book and then work ourselves out. Is that fair with you? And this is a fabulous book. Of course it is. It covers so many topics, and there's so many layers in there, and I loved reading it. There's so many ways and so many reasons to keep secrets in a family. And that was one of the themes here. Everybody had a secret. What do each of you see as the meaning of the novel's title? Everything I Never Told You. From your perspective. And I will start with you.
Start with me, all right. I suppose for me, it's very much coming from the perspective of being a teen librarian. It's something that I think you do as am I loud enough? I can't tell.
I can hear you.
I can start with the teen room voice and start lecturing. But I'm not asking anyone to leave. So I would say for me, the idea of teens especially, it's when you start keeping secrets. As a teenager, it's kind of a transition from being a younger child where you feel like your parents will always know everything and should know everything. And then you start to realize, no, you actually don't want your parents to know everything. And I think it becomes when you find your peers, when you find, in this case, your siblings, and you develop that bond of who knows what about your life. And so in that sense, I think for me, the focus became partly the teen characters, but also, again, the fact that teens don't tend to realize their parents aren't telling them everything either.
Okay, Nadia, do you have anything? Either, if you have anything to add to that?
Sure. How I translated the title, first of all, it was a perfect title, and I agree. The book struggles with the family secrets and also the family truths, right? And so I immediately related to being a parent, as well as being the first, right? So when you think about the dad and sort of the first to be first generation American, the first to have all the accomplishments that he had in terms of being a college goer, again, not sharing so much of that struggle, not sharing the legacy of his parents that allowed him to have all those successes in life. The struggles for himself in assimilating. Again, all those things could have been certainly helpful for his daughter and what was really her destiny, a very sort of this tremendous weight to carry in fulfilling her mother's dreams and also her father's dreams. So all those secrets that a family keeps and unfortunately manifest in very deep mental health stressors for kids.
Chris?
Hi. So thank you to each and every one of you and the library trustees and the library for putting this on. So this book spoke to me on like every single level. I have all these notes in my phone, and I feel like there are so many different parts where the different characters, their lives mirrored many, many, many aspects in my own life, both now and in the past. So when it says like everything I never told you, like I totally understand. Like I didn't have secrets in the sense there are just things that I actively hid from people, but I never went to sleepover parties until I was, much older, and even then it had to be like someone my parents knew, and it wasn't like a secret. I just didn't accept other people's invitations, but I didn't want to be like, no, my parents, for a number of cultural reasons, would never let me sleep at your house, or it wasn't like a secret, but in the sense that my parents we were actively hiding it. But I was a latchkey kid, which now you can talk about the problems with out of school kind of time, but once school was out, luckily someone could pick us up and would take us home. But it was kind of like a secret that I just spent, with my little sister, kind of just watching, my little sister and my cousins. But I was home by myself and I was taking care of them, and that was kind of our life. It was definitely not, the typical American life, and those were just things that you just didn't share with people. And even today, I don't spend all day talking to people about, things that are hard for me or that were hard in the past, because you want to move forward from them and make things better for, the next generation. But there are things that, they're not necessarily secrets, but they spoke to me. There are so many ways where, I knew I've been taunted, and when James, who's this character who's a professor, was taunted the first time he taught, I totally get that. I've actually taught at a university level. and I look a little young, and I taught when I was even younger. So, and it's hard, you know, and I know people, you know, don't treat me the right way they should, perhaps, just because of what they see. And it's hard, and they're not necessarily secrets, but they're just these things that I've experienced that I don't generally talk about, or we don't say.
Right.
And that book had to make me relive them all, so it's okay.
Sure.
I'll do anything for Brookline.
Was there any point, or what point in the book touched you most? What character, or, and this is a very broad question, but to get us started, what character or moment in the book touched you most? Robin?
Shall I go?
Yeah.
I have two. I was just speaking to a couple of folks in the audience. My mother and my father are both physicists. So my mother was a physicist in the early 60s and met a lot of the same kind of bias against her ability to do it. She ultimately, for example, did not get her PhD because the administrators in the department decided she shouldn't because she had children, and therefore why should she try? And my father, on the other hand, did get his PhD, and there was a distinct difference there. And it wasn't her peers. Her peers had no problem with it, actually. It was the higher kind of structure. So that part of it definitely spoke to me. That I had grown up in a household where my mother was very aware of giving my older sister and I the sense that we could do anything we wanted. Ultimately, I can't do science because I can't do the math. But I love talking about it. I love hearing about it. I love encouraging other people to do it. We just started a Girls Who Code Club down in the computer lab tonight. And partially my reasons for that is because, my personal reasons for that are because I want to support that as much as I can. The other thing is I actually had a lot of friends in high school and beyond who ultimately came out as gay or lesbian. And so that aspect of the book also, I remember watching some of my friends go through that in high school, and to this day I have a lot of friends that are part of that world, and I was glad to see that in the book as well, that that's another aspect of being hidden, something that you can't control, that is, you know, not always the best to be public about.
Right.
So.
Any other moments between you, Nadia, and Chris, that you might want to share that touched you deeply?
So the characters that touched me deeply, definitely James, the father, and Lydia, the daughter. James, because again, being first generation myself, I'm a daughter to immigrants who came here to the United States in the 60s. And also wanting to please my family as much as I can, and certainly live their dreams. And then also being a daughter. I'm extremely loyal to my mom, and certainly also wanting to please her even at this moment. I'm 40-something with children of my own, and I wake up every day wanting to make my mom happy and to please her. And I still, sort of her struggles and as well as her sacrifice, you know, very much like Marilyn. I mean, before Marilyn's time, you know, getting married and putting aside dreams for a college education, and for her, she really wanted to be a teacher, and instead took care of her 6 children and her husband. So those moments of, you know, James, again, not being accepted, not having a social network, and hoping that college would provide that path in terms of making connections was certainly a part of the book that resonated for me, as well as that it was like, wow. That's when I actually started to fall in love with the book, because I gotta admit, this was a hard text initially to read. You know, it starts off very brash and painful, and I had to put it down for a while, and I started another book. And the other book, funny enough, Charles Blow explores a lot about family secrets, and it brought me back to this text. So that's the part that I felt like resonated with me.
Chris?
So again, so much resonated with me, and it's a really good book. If you haven't read it, you should. If you have, I would love to hear on some too. But for me, Lydia's character, and then hearing how her parents treat her, and then hearing from the perspective of her 2 siblings, sort of how their parents' treatment of them versus her was really powerful. So I'm also a first generation. My parents came here in the 70s, And I have a younger sister, and she's a physician, a surgeon, and she's married to another doctor, and I'm not. So it spoke to me in so many ways. It's kind of like the downfall of my life is that I'm not going to medical school right now. So that's kind of, it was hard to, and my parents mean well, like that's what they wanted. And I just don't have a medical degree, and I kind of never will. So, and it's really hard. They do love us. They do the best they can for us. But that's, it's very apparent for any of you who have experienced it. There is a difference between the way they treat myself and my husband versus my sister and brother-in-law. And it's felt all the time. So that was really hard. I'm going to try to cry now.
Well, do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
So it's really hard because it's, I am, not a physician, so it's just really hard because you see in the book how they just put everything on Lydia. And then the pressure that she was under, so that there was like an examination in reading the book that I had to think about myself. And I think, a lot of it is my parents perhaps wish that they were also physicians. I'm Thai Chinese, and in Thailand, you take an exam when you finish high school, and how you score on the exam determines where and what you will do for college or university, really. So the highest score you get means you actually can go to medical school. So if you're the smartest people are doctors, are physicians in Thailand. So my sister being a physician is like tantamount to sort of God. And all our relatives call her for, any medical question. And what are they going to call me for? So they ask me like inane, interesting questions. So that was kind of a hard thing. And then the other part of the book that just super resonated with me and made me really re-examine how I look at things is their children are biracial. And obviously it's like a book, there are no pictures, but their children are biracial, and they have what sounds like a blonde, white mother. And my husband is Caucasian, German, English background, but my children, and this is the case with all biracial children, is you notice their minority background or their otherness. And so my kids look Asian to people. And I'm not texting, all my notes are on my phone because I can't write anymore. But so, and it says so often, I kind of listen to this while driving as well as reading in my phone, but they said a couple times, children of mixed backgrounds often struggle to find their place. And their kids grappled with this the whole time, and they were teased. There's that horrible scene where Nat is teased in the pool, and I totally know what that's like, and I just was like, so hard for me. So I worry because I have 3 biracial children, and they look Asian, but they also look, just a little different, not fully 100% Thai Chinese, but they're Asian, and I just so badly don't want them to struggle. I don't want them to feel that pain. And I know all kids get teased at some point, but it's heartbreaking, like this girl kills herself. So I was like grappling with that, and then at the same time being like, I must not show favoritism to any of my children. And like, I'm like, oh my God, I think I hugged Grayson too much today. Must show love to Hunter. And like the book was so stressful. So it resonated in me as like a mom of biracial children, a daughter with this amazing surgical daughter, like sister person, and like Thanksgiving's coming or something. A lot going on here, folks.
I feel like I want to come over there and give you a hug. I'm not trying to make light of that because I think we all feel the pressures of that, of being the outsider. I know growing up in oh my God, so long ago I don't even want to tell you, but growing up in the desegregated South and being the first black to do whatever, that was always a pressure in my life and still resonates with me about being the outsider, being the first, being the one who's different. Do you all have those kind of things? You've already said it so eloquently, Chris, for you, but Nadia and Robin, can you relate to that outsider thing? Yourself?
Well, certainly I can say, growing up, yes. The fact that my parents were both physicists in the suburbs was not particularly normal. And, it was my sister and I were both held at an academic level, certainly that was considered the most important, that you should be intelligent. And they did not put down strictures about what you should do with that. They just wanted to ensure that we were smart, and that we could have the education we needed for that. But at the same time, growing up, I never was a sports person. My town was very much a sports town. It's Reading, Massachusetts. And there's a sense of fitting in or not fitting in, of course, is a huge theme in the book. And I was thinking about that actually, that I think most people, hopefully, have a moment when they decide whether they care what other people think. And there are times when it's very hard to do that, especially when you're younger. If you're a younger teen, especially, most people can agree that middle school is like the worst possible time. But I remember distinctly having that moment when I realized, because of the support of my parents and their understanding of being different, that I could say, no, I actually don't care what those girls over there think, because they're mean and they don't treat people well. I'd rather be my parents' daughter than be someone that fits in for them. So there's that kind of moment. I also went to a women's college, and I will say that over the course of attending that college, I was very rapidly made aware of just how much that still matters, and how much being in an all-female environment makes a huge difference for a lot of people. And you don't think it makes a difference until you're suddenly in a class full of 60 women and 3 guys, and you realize how much guys dominate the class when they're more. So it's a very different experience, and I think that has affected me the whole rest of my life, going through that experience.
So I want to talk about first in the context of my work. As you all heard, I'm very fortunate to be the executive director of a program called Steps to Success. It's a comprehensive achievement program serving students in grades 4 all the way through college that are living in poverty, and or first generation to go on to college. And so the first for us was 2 years ago. We had one of our students, the very first student, be accepted to medical school. Big deal. Another first for us was having one of our 2011 BHS grad get accepted into law school. Daughter of immigrants, both students' daughters, first generation to go on to college, came as immigrants to Brookline, and really Brookline, the town of Brookline, nurtured them, loved them, and allowed them to be in these amazing institutions pursuing their dreams. And I don't know, it just clicked for me about, we've been celebrating these 2 young people and as the first. And I'm like, wow, we're creating the same pressure, like we're contributing to that pressure, right? I'm like, you're the first. Finish that medical school, because then we're gonna say the first to graduate from medical school. Right. Finish that law school. I just saw my student last week. What do you need? MBTA pass? What do you need? We're rooting for you. When you get that degree, it's all of us, it's for all of us. And again, through this book, right? This young woman who would be the first to get to, accomplish, that medical degree. And so I think about the context of our work as caregivers, as coaches, as mentors, as parents, about the pressure that we put, sometimes really unconsciously. I mean, here we are, we're celebrating, like, yay, we're your cheerleaders. And essentially, are we creating more stress for them about what does it mean to not? Like, what if I reach a point that this is really too exhausting? I don't think I can do this. Do we lose them? Right? Am I now jeopardizing one of my younger students? I'm thinking about my 4th graders in terms of that mentoring relationship that can happen with that student, because again, anything can happen, and we just need to celebrate what they have accomplished right now and love them and be pleased. Listen, you got through the first phase. That's what we had prayed for. That's what we had worked for. Who knew that law school or medical school or, going on to any graduate program would be it? I mean, we were always sort of secretly praying for it, but we need to change the language. I need to be conscious about not saying the first every time I refer to my students. So thank you. This book, thank you.
You know, it's so funny, and I just want to tell you a little story. My son grew up in this town, and when he was a little boy, there was the pressure of, I was married, my husband had 2 kids, and my husband's 2 kids, Sean and Chantel, my stepchildren, were very athletic. So they would go to Saturday soccer, that's what you do, right? In most towns like this, or basketball, or football, or all of that. Nick had no desire, couldn't care less. But I went and took him because of the pressures of the family, because I wanted him to be like the other kids. And I would take him to the basketball game to be on somebody's team, and he'd be climbing up in the bleachers. And I'd take him to the soccer game, and he would be picking flowers in one of the fields. And I was so embarrassed about my kid not fitting into the rest of the children. He just wasn't like them. And it took me so long as a parent, but by the grace of God, finally realizing that my son had his own song to sing, if you will, and did that. But sometimes you have to, and I'm saying this to you because I just feel, because I think you know this, but sometimes you have to just find your own way of letting your children be who they are, which was certainly not the case here. But I wanted to ask you all, what were the points of intervention? What could you have done from your perspectives to help this family before it was too late? Can you see any moments there that someone maybe else could have stepped in or was this just a fait accompli? It's all already done. Any possible points of intervention there?
I actually had the thought as I was reading, because it's a period setting. There are a couple of things I think, certainly this is a more broad theme, but as a librarian, especially as a public librarian, I think one of my goals as the teen librarian is to provide a place for teens to come that are away from their parents, away from school, but still a place they could come and possibly ask me questions, possibly find them on their own, but as a safe space, as a space to ask those questions and not worry about who's going to know that you're asking. And that's something I count very important as part of the teen librarian world. Part of that is just providing the books. We have a phrase in the young adult world of we provide mirrors and windows. So it's a mirror to who you are and a window to what other people are. That's what books should be. And you work very hard to make sure your collection has both of those things for everybody that walks in the door. That's the goal. So that's something I think, had someone like that existed in her life, someone who was an unattached adult, someone who's not part of the family, not part of the school, not part of a group that would judge her, maybe that might have helped Lydia to talk to someone about the expectations and about the pressures that she was under, or any of the kids actually, any of them. It's that thing you never want to give up on any kid. You never want to think that they don't think they can talk to you. But now I've lost track of the other point.
It comes back.
Yeah, I'll think.
Honey, you already touched on this, but did you or Christy?
So, sort of jokingly, when I finished reading this book, my takeaway was like, it's amazing I didn't kill myself. I was telling my supervisor. So I work in the diversity office, diversity, inclusion, and community relations here, and I also am on the Commission on the Status of Women. So also the stuff about kind of how Marilyn gave up her career or her aspirations at one point, that really kind of spoke to me too. And then also I am on the Asian American Commission, though all these thoughts are my own. But must put that out there. But I kind of feel like, so some of the stuff that I'm involved in, whether it's in the town or statewide here in our diversity office, is I really want to, and I love the partnerships we have with the library and other departments in the town, is to make it more a celebration of the diversity that's in our town. Like my whole hope and prayer is that my kids they can go anywhere and be accepted for who they are and that their friends are the same way. And it's kind of a little bit almost ridiculous too, because I feel bad for your librarians, is they're always like getting these books for me on diversity, like we read like same but different, and like these like, different family structures you could have, because I want my kids to know like everything's okay, everyone's different but the same, and that's beautiful. And so I kind of wish that we could figure out a way to do more of that, to do more of a celebration in our town, to understand that these differences are things that we can celebrate and that make us as a town better and richer as a community. And then on the flip side, some of the stuff that I've done, though my thoughts are my own, that we've done at the Asian American Commission are to sort of, and I know that, you know, not everyone in here is Asian American, but that's kind of the lens that I looked at this book as a minority, is to break those stereotypes, or in some Asian communities, reaching out for mental health care is just still really a taboo. And for any minority immigrant populations, they're working so hard to, you know, put food on the table and get housing that they're like, therapy? I don't have time for that, or a support group. You know, what does that mean? But I want us to be able to make that available for communities, to let them know, to have a support system out there, to break that taboo. Because I think it would have been a great help for many of the characters in here. And it's not, you know, and people deal with their pressure themselves. Like, I know of family members who have committed suicide because there's this pressure to be the breadwinner and to take care of your family, and it's really hard. And so I think that's something that there are points of intersection where they could have really helped, I think. And that's why I'm glad to work in the office we have here at work, and steps, in the library. Like, it's just a really open community, and they do so much that's really inclusive. And they, obviously this is the 1970s in Ohio, but I think it's really important because they didn't have, the different people didn't have anyone to talk to. That's all.
Oh, I remembered my other thing, unless and that comes to what you just said. One of the big differences now is the internet. As much as the internet can be a wild and crazy place, it also provides people a way to find other people like them. It also finds people an awareness of the fact that you are not stuck forever in your hometown, that you can get out, that you will find your people wherever they are. And I think that's something it's not always, you know, as I said, the internet is the internet. It's good and bad in many ways. But I think the greatness of it is that sense of community that you can find, especially when you're in an isolated situation, which I feel like this book very much is about, is that there's no sense of being able to get out, especially with thoughts of suicide. Most of the time, in my experience, there's that sense of suicide being something that at that moment in time that person thinks there is no way out but this, and that's the danger of that thought. And so I think that's the thing that we as a community can do, and you know what you try to do always is there are more options than that. You know, we can help, other people can help. You will eventually get away from whatever it is that's making you go down that path. But it's a momentary decision usually, and very hard to take back.
I wonder if there's not an atmosphere, this could just be me, please correct me. I wonder if we're not living in a culture or a time when the atmosphere is so polarized that people, that even young people particularly, are feeling isolated because of the, do you see any ways that we can change that? And you know, there's certainly the political thing, but I don't, sometimes I feel hopeless on that end, the culture that we live in today, the tone of the culture. The television shows are about confrontation. The politics are about confrontation. Everything is about separating us. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? Well, how that affects our young people?
I will say that as a librarian, obviously I care about books, but I care about stories of all kinds. So television, film, media, audio stories told live, any of these things are all good. But I think one of the great boons of fiction, of course, is that it teaches empathy. And that's why a lot of people tend to forget that you live other people's lives through books. And that's the reason why the more of a reader you are, the more empathy you have for the people around you. And I think that's a real key for a lot of people, to just understand that, you know, that person sitting across from you that looks differently from you may not be as different as you think. And that there are so many stereotypes and just lives to be explored and broken down and said, no, this isn't actually true, or this is true in some ways, but not this other way. And I did bring a book list that I put at the back of the room, which is all books from the teen lit world that address a lot of the same questions. And of course they're a little different because they're written, most of them contemporary to now, and it's a changed world from the world of this book. I don't know that it's automatically better, but there is progress, I think. So that's the kind of idea that there are more stories to be seen. There can always be more. There always should be more. There are more. There are certain categories of books I wish there were, 50 of, and we only have 2. But, we're getting better, and we're always trying to get better. One of the big campaigns of the last couple of years in the teen lit world and the children's book world is We Need Diverse Books, which is a nonprofit organization pushing the entire industry to get better about that. And basically, it was a bunch of people who decided to no longer wait for the publishing industry to do it on its own, and said, okay, it's not happening fast enough. We need to make it clear that we demand this, and that we want this as readers, as parents, as kids. We want to see ourselves in books, we want to see our friends in books, but we also want to see people not like us. And that's a big shift, and it's been very gratifying to see it move forward, but we can always do more.
Any other thoughts?
Yes, you're right. I think this is an interesting time. Teens are, certainly, they're often discounted in terms of their, what they bring, in terms of their strengths, in terms of their being able to be reflective. Often, depending on what race you are, I think, especially if you're an African American or Latino male, you're often, there's fear about who you are, about what your story is. And that's particularly complex. I think even from an Asian experience, I'm speaking about what I see on a day-to-day basis in the district at the high school. I think for my Asian students, they often carry the weight of, being the ultra smart student that excels in math and science, and that's certainly a pretty, big pressure, and obviously, a cultural stereotype that they have to face. And so I think the ways in which community schools can certainly help tackle, or at least, chip away at those pieces, is to certainly embrace cultural competence amongst faculty, amongst staff, around sort of being aware, connecting with students, right? So it's not about, a student getting it, like, oh gosh, yeah, that paper was really good, but really making that connection with students to sort of see through, wow, this student is carrying a particular stress or pressure. And so how do I connect with that student so that they know that there's an adult that is watching out for them, that is, certainly there to coach them through certain things. But I think it's also what we call here at Brookline High, which is having those courageous conversations. I think students they're hungry for that. They're hungry for adults to engage in that dialogue around difference, right? They're hungry and excited to hear and learn about different texts. I think, certainly in this book, there's a lot around this interracial relationship. I mean, one book that I just is a teen book, Please Come Softly by Jacqueline Woodson, is, although it's the 90s, yet still dealing with this interracial relationship, this young Jewish girl falling in love with an African American boy. And so how do we bring those texts into the classroom, into, whether it's the leadership clubs, what have you, but also adults, certainly doing the work needed around their own isms and their own, their own maybe past traumas about their own teenage lives. So that's just a small.
So I'll try to be brief. So I read this book and was like, I'm supposed to talk about it from myself, from my point of view. But so one thing I think, and it means a lot to me, is I think there's a lot of pressure to being an Asian American first immigrant, eldest daughter in the family to go to college kind of thing is like kind of a little bit much. But the model minority myth, to realize, I know you're shaking your head, it's hard. It's hard, and I'm pretty good at math, and I was a bio major in college, but I didn't really enjoy organic chemistry. Like, it's rough, to really put it lightly. And I was like, I'm not going to medical school, and that's really hard. But to say that, while I had pressure, I had amazing, really close, great best friends. I had good neighbors. And now I live in Brookline, and I feel very fortunate that this is where we're growing our family here. Because there are so many people who are just so nice. My family doesn't, in some ways, I guess, thankfully, live very close. But it's hard because you're kind of on your own, and I feel like I'm very different. I look different, but everyone's been really, really amazing. I have friends who give us awesome hand-me-downs for my kids, and it's like a community. People invite us to Thanksgiving, and it's nice. And I guess what I would say is, if you can and you see other people, just a small gesture that you make for them could literally mean the world. After we had our last baby in a blizzard, it was a really lonely, literally isolating time. Like, no one could drive to see us because you couldn't park anywhere. You weren't allowed on the road, and we physically couldn't go out because I had 2 young people and a baby, and really sweet people came to say hello, to care, to bring you food. Because the last thing that I was like, oh my God, I think we'll eat cereal for the rest of our life. Like, I can't get a way out. But to realize you can help someone, it doesn't matter if they look different from you, or I don't know, I guess I would just be, stop for a minute and think. Or I've had some really, really nice neighbors who are like, wow, it looks like you got a lot on your plate. Like, if you need to, we'll walk your kid home for you because we kind of have to go buy you. And it's okay. And that means a lot, and it makes us just a stronger, sweeter community. So, that's kind of something I guess I would just think about, is to think about the other person out there. Do they need a hand? Or sometimes, you meet people and sometimes they're really grumpy. And it makes me sad, but to maybe wonder, maybe they're grumpy for a reason. Maybe their back hurts and they need help with shoveling, or something like that. So I guess, I think that would have made things a lot different for this family. Because it's obviously didn't have any close friends. Nobody knew them at work. Nobody knew them in the town. They didn't know anyone, and no one knew them. And I think knowing what's going on next door, it's really, it's nice. Like I am not good at making cookies. I am the worst. But my kids and I struggled to make some when we brought them to our neighbors, and they pretended they liked them. And now we have this really fun friendship, and they're much better bakers than I am. But so it's just something to think about, because I think this family just didn't have that because they were so different looking. And I guess don't be afraid that they are different looking.
The idea of community, please, go right ahead.
I
It's
had
so
a thought that
important.
came to me in the middle of this, sorry. One thing I just wanted to give as an example that's a very small example, but I think was important. We have a teen room downstairs. We have a variety of rules for how the teen room works, and if you push the rules too much, eventually you will get spoken to, and ultimately maybe asked to leave for the day. But it all depends. And my general policy is that the teens should be treated the same as anyone else in the building, and that they, nonetheless, they're teens. They're going to be louder. They're going to be more rambunctious. They just usually arrive right after school and are just woo down the stairs, and we get a huge crowd, and it's great. But one of the things I remember having a long discussion at one point with a bunch of 7th to 8th grade boys. I have a general rule in my room that you can't use language that would be offensive. That's fairly standard. You don't want, especially when you're near the children's room, you don't want people yelling things out. However, if you get a bunch of guys gaming on the computers, they're going to start trash talking almost immediately. So we had a very long conversation, about an hour conversation, about what they could say and what they couldn't. And my final rule was, do you mean it as an insult? And they'd be like, yes. Then you can't say it. And they'd be like, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? They went through the whole roster of words they could possibly say to each other, including things like racial slurs, including all kinds of language, that I was like, you don't know who's sitting over there. You could be incredibly freaking out someone sitting over at that table, so don't. It's not nice. You're in a public space. But also just the fact that they started to really understand why I was asking it, and eventually saying things like, well, can I call him ignorant? Do you mean it as an insult? Yes. No, you can't. And in a similar sort of way, I've had conversations where, for example, there was a young man who decided to kind of shock me by saying that one of his favorite books was American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. And I said, well, okay, I can see why, it's well written. And I said, it was not for me. And he kind of went, well, why? And I said, well, because it's honestly really violent towards women. And I couldn't handle that after a while. And he was like, oh, and he kind of went off about the literary quality of the book. And I said, yes, but when it's you that's being killed, it's not as easy to read. And he kind of went, oh. And so, it's all those little conversations you can have to break someone out of their patterns and say, think about it from a different perspective. That might be why this doesn't work for everyone, or this is a different way of thinking about it. So I think that's just something and all the teams are very willing to talk, and they do appreciate when you're willing to talk to them. If you're unafraid to bring up kind of complicated and difficult topics, they'd rather talk it through, and I'd honestly rather have that conversation with them, especially with words. Words are better than action a lot of the time. So.
I was going to add that the notion of community is so important in every neighborhood, and you'd be surprised how many people don't feel that they're in a community and feel isolated. Our church is in a very tough neighborhood at Roxbury on a very tough, challenging street, and we open the church now every Thursday, and we have dinners. It's for anybody who wants to come in. It's not rocket science, it's just an easy thing. But it's the idea of trying to reestablish a community in a place where people are afraid of their neighbors. And I think that goes to any neighborhood. I don't think that's just limited to a lower economic level. Or I think we're all a part of that, so I really appreciate what you said. I wanted to open it up if you had any questions or comments about the book. Yes, sir.
Just point of information from Chris. Like here in the United States, the brightest minds are put into law, and in China, the brightest minds are put into engineering. And it was encouraging to hear the brightest minds in Thailand are put into medical, just like in Cuba. So could you run down the pecking order a little bit?
So I don't know.
Did you all hear that? He's talking about the brightest minds. Could you just
So
kind of...
he's just asking about how people fare on exams in Thailand and what occupations they can go into. And actually, when you graduate from your university in Thailand, you have your black, cap and gown, but then you get a sash or whatever in your color, and green is the color of being a doctor. So they even more can show who's a really smarty pants. So I don't know the exact pecking order, but something you're a doctor, a dentist. My aunt's a dentist. That was huge for everyone. A doctor, a dentist, engineers, and lawyers. Typically those are how.
Engineers come ahead of the lawyers.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Anyone else? Comment, question, thought? Yes, ma'am?
I just wanted to say I saw an incredible play last night called Mr. Joy, and it's really a play about community. It takes place in Harlem, and it's about a man that you never see. It's a one-woman show. She plays 9 different characters, including a very young girl and a grandmother and all these other people. But it's based around this man that you never see. His name is Mr. Joy. He is dead at the beginning of the play, but he was a Chinese shoemaker who befriended this little African-American girl who was so taken with the idea of making shoes, and he just totally mentored her and created this incredible community around this small shoe store. Totally worth seeing, and an incredible.
Is it still playing?
It's still playing. It's playing for another week
Where?
or so. At the Emerson.
The Emerson, Mr.
Black
Joy,
Mr. Joy.
at the Emerson Black Box. So
And,
that's
just
pass that.
all about how community can both support you and difficulties around it.
Thank you for sharing. Yes, ma'am.
So, one of the things that we talked about a lot actually when we selected the book, and one of the things that resonated with me, and PhD in neurobiology, female scientist, I also have a 7-year-old son, was some of the struggles really that Marilyn faced, and sort of the balance that she's trying to achieve, and how while some of that, is clearly in the 1970s, a lot of it isn't. And looking at the audience, I wondered if you guys could talk a little bit, about some of the particular struggle for women in Celeste's work.
So, thank you for that question. So the struggles for women in the field, in STEM fields, right? So I'm a social worker, right? But yet I came to STEPS I had a vision around really creating and building a STEM program for our students. And you know, there's a lot of questioning around that about why? Why are you so passionate about that? Like why? Why is it so important? And so I've always been a medical social worker and worked a lot in hospital and community health systems. And it was just startling for me to see so few women in positions of power in those systems, so few practitioners who were people of color and also reflecting the communities that I worked in, that I was like, wow, how are we preparing students? How are we getting students excited? How are we sort of sharing the vast, you know, opportunities that exist around STEM? It's not so much, I think often, especially with first generation college goers and even children of immigrants, they see STEM fields as only being, you know, a physician or a nurse. I don't know how many girls I have that are like, well, my mom says I need to become a nurse, right? And it's about, you know, really around career exploration for me, as well as, you know, we have really concrete data around how students fare. Students who are living in poverty, students of color, and how they fare in the math and sciences. And so if we could build that in my after-school space for those 4th graders and 5th graders, so that by the time they get to high school, they're exploring, you know, that calculus or that honors chem, right? And that would certainly help their college applications, but again, I'm looking at outcomes in the long term. So that's why I really feel like having students be exposed and also be confident around math, especially, is really a social justice subject for me. I think about great thinkers like Bob Moses, who created the Algebra Project. I think about, you know, even a local educator, Adrian Mims, and why he created the Calculus Project. It was around educational equity. So that's why I wanted to dive into this STEM space for my students.
So you're probably gonna hate me and I'll never be asked back to a panel. So I interpreted your question differently because I read it differently because I'm a mom with a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old, and an 8-month-old. So I kind of saw her grappling with being a mom and kind of making a great life for her kids versus maybe wanting a career as a totally different thing. Because so there's so many lenses that I looked at this at, because the Commission on the Status of Women for the state, which I'm a commissioner on, I mean, we advocate our brains out for pay equity because women are still not earning the same as men. They're earning 78 cents on the dollar. It's better in STEM fields. They're earning 66 cents on the dollar if they're an African American woman, 54 cents if they're a Latino woman. It's really hard. And there's a pay equity bill at the State House right now. You're welcome to call your legislator. And tell them that Chris said to do so. So I looked at it from that point of view of, you know, it's just so hard and she's, you know, kind of grappling with that. But then on the flip side, I looked at it as like a stay-at-home mom versus a working mom, and part of me is just angry at that question because I know of tons of amazing moms and women who work, who outside the home, who work part-time outside the home, who work at home full-time at home watching their kids. And sometimes it's a decision that they made because that's what they wanted to do, or sometimes it's an economic decision because they aren't in a STEM field or they aren't in a field where they could earn enough and still be able to pay for the rising cost of childcare, which is crazy. And now that I have 2 kids in school, the school schedule is not really conducive towards a working mother. Like, let's just be clear. So it's really hard, I think, you know, a couple of moms. And then on the flip side is this whole, can you have it all? No, you can't have it all. You know, you can maybe have it at some times. And I think there's not to say being a mother in the 70s was easy. Hello, it's not. My mom worked like literally like 2-3 full-time jobs. She cleaned houses, worked at a country club. I ate really well because I ate the leftovers of people at country clubs. Like, you know what I mean? Like the food that was brought home, like I ate them. And so I kind of looked like I ate really well, but it was, you know. So it's hard, and now it's a different set of being a mom. Like, you go to birthday parties, and there are like themes for kids' parties, and I can't do it all. Like, I don't bake, like I mentioned. they make everything's out of minions now or something, you go to a party, like I can't do that. So I'm like, I feel stressed that I'm like not meeting the working mom part, and I'm not meeting the balanced mom and the stay-at-home mom, and now I'm like so proud if I make a snack box for my kids that has like cut up happy vegetables that look like animals or something, because that's the new fad, and it's awesome and it's great for people who are interested in doing it, but I like can't do it. So I feel like there's a real pressure now, like, you know, in 2015, that's different. And there's Pinterest. I don't know if you guys know about it, but it's a website where people can show off their amazing mommy, family-friendly creations. They like sew costumes for their kids. Like, I am really excited if I can get myself to Costco and buy a $16.99 Ninja Turtle costume. Like, if you can help me get that, you win the prize. Because like, I'm not paying $50 for a costume, and I don't sew. So it's just hard. So like, I guess I took your question as like, there's an issue of pay equity, like, and women aren't making the same, and some women are staying at home because they choose to, and or others can't. The rising cost of childcare, the non-family friendly, you know, schedule, the lack of early education that is setting people up for a really rough time when they enter in 4th grade, because we need universal pre-K. We need all these support services, and they're not here. And like, I guess we as a society need to decide that we want to help the whole community. We want to help the children from birth onwards. And we have some programs. We have a parent-child home program in Brookline. But it, you know, everything needs more funding. There's always more, we always need more money and more staff. I'm sure you would love more money and more staff. And staff, you know, the library always needs more funding.
But the one thing I don't understand, does anybody here my age? Because I feel like do you think that things are, I think the internet has changed things, maybe speeded it up, but I'm not so sure that it's so much worse now than it was. I think you're going through the same thing that we went through.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
just
what
more
I thought you were
public.
saying.
It's just more, I think it's just more public, and there's just this peer pressure where people can use Facebook and Twitter to show that they're like
Maybe
really
that's it.
doing it. I think it makes it a little bit isolating at the same time.
And, you know, certainly I know, given your background, you can speak to this even more, but I remember reading an article recently about how women are, you know, certainly going into these positions, you know, neuroscientists or, you know, engineers, and going into these corporations, but yet feeling completely isolated because they're often the only one, right? There are not enough mentoring programs within these corporations to retain these staff. I mean, and so who do you go to when you're like feeling like, whoa, all right, I'm still kind of feeling biased here. And so the gender politics still exist in 2015. And so again, if I don't have those women who are, you know, who are trailblazers in that way, coming and speaking to my girls, right, about, listen, this is an opportunity. This is what it looks like. That's why it's important for you to explore, you know, Lego, robotics, you know, to go into digital media, all those places that we don't see enough girls at, you know, even here, an incredibly resourced, excellent school system, we're still struggling to get girls into that. Let's not even talk about students of color. So when students don't really see a reflection of themselves in these positions, then yes, absolutely, we're going to continue to have an issue of not having enough of the diversity needed in these STEM fields.
I think I saw Ken right here.
Yeah, I, just 2 things. One, I just want to mention that I think social class is a huge issue that we haven't.
She's saying social class is a huge issue that we haven't explored.
Right, so I'll just leave that there for now. But speaking to the question of that mother, I just couldn't connect to her. I don't think it's about whether she had a career or she was at home. I think it was really about her. I mean, to some degree as a person, she just seemed, I could never really get a feeling for her, like who she was, what she seemed, I mean, she cut off her relationship with her own mother completely. They had no grandparents involved, no siblings or aunts or uncles or cousins, and she didn't make friends, it didn't seem like. I mean, that could have been a big moderating factor, I think, in terms of the whole family, if she made friends at the school or even went to the PTO meetings or did anything. They were just so isolated, and I feel like to some degree that was part of her personality. And then
mother's personality is very peculiar, not any one that she related to, because his mother was so isolating. So that's not necessarily a universal, we hope. It's not a universal personality. He's so isolated not to go to the meetings.
Just to add to that, I was thinking this through partly from what you both were saying and also to that point. One of the things I think is so important that are the moments when the mother has a chance to see something different is when she sees someone in the field. She sees a female doctor, someone who's not a nurse, but someone who is a doctor and who did that. Obviously she feels like, wait a minute, it is possible. And I think that's the key for most people in the world. If you dream you can do something, it's good to have people tell you you can do it, but it's even better to see that people have already done it. And I think, there's so much of a sense of the community, and I think particularly amongst women, I think women should support each other, and women need to show what they've done. We need to look back and see the women in history that have done it. Recently we got a 3D printer at the library and I named it Ada Lovelace, after one of the first computer programmers. And it's one of those things where people are like, who is that? And I'm like, let me tell you, because she was awesome. And there's all these interesting sort of moments of when you can bring that up, and bring that up as an idea. I often think where I went to college was Bryn Mawr College, which is very well known for its science arm. They produce extraordinary women out of there all the time. But it's one of those things that, again, that of course Bryn Mawr is in itself, a very lofty goal in some ways, but at the same time, it's a community that builds itself up, and all of us, there's a joke that it's a combination between a school, a summer camp, and a cult. And all of that is kind of true, but that sense of once you find women who are doing something you appreciate, make sure to support them, make sure to talk about them, make sure to bring them up and say, look at this woman doing this amazing thing, and not just other women, but everybody.
And that goes against the grain of our culture too, because we live in such a competitive world that in the corporate world, I know, in television news, no, you don't have good friends, because those are the people who will take your jobs. Yes, ma'am?
So I found this book to be so interesting, and there's like a whole book discussion separate from this content discussion. Although I like the years that we think books that a kid doesn't die in the book. I guess I have a few thoughts. One I want to say is I also found the character, particularly the mother, to be such an extreme, as if the author wanted to make a point about isolation. Like I kept thinking, isn't she curious who her father is? Like there have to be some roots here. I mean, the rootlessness was defining for every character in the book, but it was also an extreme. And yet, every time I hear about the tragedy of these shootings that keep happening, it's always people in isolation. And it really reinforces, that communities really do need to look after each other. And I think we have, in our community, which is not ideal, but it's a wonderful community, we do have mechanisms that we try with kids in schools to create, neighborhood outreaches. But it's a constant struggle, and I think that the internet, it makes you feel isolated because you can't do the purposing on Pinterest, but it also lets people stay isolated and have a false sense of connectedness, and then prove to be more isolated. But the point that I keep thinking about is, because this is what our discussion is about right now, is we want every person to feel they have a place, regardless of what they look like, regardless of whether they look like one thing and feel like another. And I struggle with that. I have a kid in high school who is a great kid. He looks like me, so he doesn't look like anything completely different, he doesn't look like minority. His opinions are different. Like there's a lot of room in our community to be supportive of a lot of things, but actually not that much diversity of ideas. There's like a lot of room to be LGBTQ. That's great. That's really important. There's not actually a lot of room to be conservative.
Right.
Which is kind of an interesting. Just to disclaim, I'm not saying he is. But I just find it really interesting because it's so critical what you're saying. I don't know the name of the woman, Nadia. What you're saying about the role of young women in the models, but then I also have to think how do we make sure that we're not just creating a different framework that's the only framework? And then I just also want to say as a sidebar, I did grow up in Ohio in a small town in the 70s. And although I sort of looked like everyone else, being a Jewish person in a small town in Ohio wasn't, it wasn't great. And then being in a school, being one of a small handful of Jewish people, and then having the school have racial integration come, really seeing how people who look different were treated even worse than I was. It was just a fascinating and sort of strange thing. So you carry that stuff around, and you don't wear it like a label. So, you know, for the purpose of this discussion, I don't look like a blue-eyed Chinese girl. I don't look like an African-American woman, but you carry around these experiences, whatever paradigm of injustice you've seen or experienced. And I think it's so hard because we want to be so inclusive of being aware of people who don't look like whatever the mainstream looks like, and yet lose track of everybody carries their own stuff.
We all do. We all carry our own stuff. Yes, I'm going to ask everybody just to be brief because lots of hands are going up.
Yeah, sure. First of all, I just really want to thank everybody for really just opening this discussion up and participating. I wonder how we can continue this discussion because I feel like it's so vitally important. And Chris, I can relate to every single thing you said.
Yeah, she shook her head a lot. Spirit.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm first generation Chinese. My parents were from Taiwan. I have a younger sister who is makes much more than I do. I am a social worker. So it's great, but in regards to my parents, I am never forgetting that I'm a social worker. So I can totally relate, and I really applaud everyone for speaking out, but I do want to know how can we continue this conversation.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I saw some other hands back here, no? Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. Then you can talk some more because I thought, I was in, yes ma'am?
I keep coming back to something, and just thinking about, forgetting about differences, specific differences of minority or this or that, but just children who somehow feel other when they're in school, for whatever reason, whether they're a little bit off, personality, this or that. The one thing that strikes me that kids like that have a better shot is when they are home, they feel totally supported. And within the family environment is a very safe place. And I think what kept getting me here, as difficult as school, as everything was in the outside world for all these people, maybe except for the mother, because she didn't exist in the outside world, but everybody else was having real difficulties. Home was not a safe place. And that is that made it so creepy for me. And I just, that's a thing, and these parents, I felt, and I have to, disclaimer, I have about 60 pages left, so I've just, there's been one comment tonight that was one spoiler, but other than that.
You took that chance and you walked in.
There's more that's coming, but I'm just saying that I somehow, with their own limitations and obviously from their backgrounds and different things, they brought their baggage with them into the house. But even when I sort of see how the different children were treated, how Nate is treated in almost, and by his father, I mean, his mother is just unavailable and unaware of everybody. The father can't bear Nate because he reminds him of himself. Hannah, the little girl, is invisible to everyone, including her siblings until probably later. She's the all-knowing because everybody leaves her alone. But it just, I had a most difficult time with the dynamics in the house.
Yeah.
And I felt that how can you have the strength to go out and face what you have to face in school? And some children do have more difficulty in school when you have absolutely nothing to come home to that's going to be supportive.
As a minister, I can tell you that there are probably a surprising number of homes that are like that.
Yeah.
It's not that unusual. I mean, maybe not to that extreme, but homes that are not necessarily safe places. Yes, sir?
You know, I do think things are getting better. I think I used to go to your church in 61, 62.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I was 5 years old at 16.
No.
I wasn't going to church in 61, but seriously,
No,
but that's fine, go right ahead.
No, I meant the church that I used to go to is the church that you're working at now.
Oh, Roxbury Presbyterian?
Yeah.
It's on Warren Street, right in the heart of Roxbury. It's not on a hill, though.
But it's not just
No,
up from Dudley.
it's a different one.
You're-
It's up from Dudley, but it's not on a hill.
Your predecessor wasn't Cannon Green? No. Different church, because, see, I went there in the early 60s.
But I don't want to get off the subject,
No,
though.
but I want to tell you, things were a lot worse in the early 60s than it is now. I could not get an apprenticeship in any building union, and I had to stop my own construction company to learn the building business. And,
So things are getting worse as far as the social.
no, it's getting better.
Getting better.
You know, not just because of laws. I mean, those days, you would never see what you see today, white people marching, demonstrating flags. I mean,
I think things are getting better, but I think there's a mental health issue that nobody's paying attention to.
Oh,
And
yeah,
we're
that's
thinking
a-
it's gun violence, but it's mental health. I'm
that's
telling
the Reagan shut down so many
We need to-
psychiatric places.
Yeah,
To
we
save
really
lives.
are seeing I'm sure as a social worker, as a minister, we need to take care of that because that is oh my God, we're in trouble. I'm telling you.
I also, so can I?
I'm just gonna let her.
I'll just be, okay, I won't be with that read. Because I just think it's really important. So a couple things is, so one, I wanted to address what Judy was saying, and this is STEPS and the Brookline Teen Center and the library, phenomenal job about the whole out of school time when you're not in school. Because you were saying like the home isn't maybe the best place or their parents maybe can't be at home. And I guess something to do, or just not being at home or being there and not being present. Yeah, so, I see both of those. And part of it is, and I'm so thankful to the people who have read the book, will finish the book, is that, and will read the book and share it with someone else, is to realize, like, my parents were, immigrants, didn't speak English when they came here. They were working their brains and bodies out. Like, they would work all day. My mom was a meat wrapper. At night, she worked in a country club all night. She smelled the cigarette smoke, because back in the day, everyone smoked everywhere. She's tired, and so if she's at home, she's like tired. She go to the dentist and fall asleep, or, she would take me to the library, and it was so wonderful, and I could read all these books, and she would be sleeping in the corner, and it's, so I guess, maybe they're not there, they're there, and maybe they're not present, because maybe they just don't have the wherewithal, or that wasn't the way they grew up. Like, I am sure that my parents, my grandparents didn't really have the same parental skills that we want to have now, for example. So just to be aware, and then part of it is related to, and I worry about this all the time, is income inequality, and the mom and or dad who can be at home when school lets out at 2:30 on Monday through Thursday and 1:40 on Friday, because like I don't know who can do that. And it's great that we have here in Brookline these services, but not everyone has them, or for maybe cultural reasons, those parents aren't comfortable necessarily sending their kid outside somewhere else, and so they feel that it's safer for their kid to be at home. I'm not saying it was great, but I was a latchkey kid. I grew up watching all those TVs, so that whole situation where the kids watch like 24 hours of TV a day and microwave their food, I am like such a Stouffer's, like frozen person. Like I know those, they bring back memories, that's my whole life. And I think the reason why I yearn to have that quintessential American life and like I want to take my kids apple picking is because you saw that on TV. So I guess to just kind of be aware of, read this book and kind of try to put yourself in there and just think, it's hard for some kids who go home or don't go home, you don't know what they're doing. And to be aware of the income inequality, it's just, I know for a fact that there's a custodian who I met as I was leaving work coming here who went to start work to clean up. So, and she has 4 kids, right? So who's home with them? So just, something to think about, can they afford that extra SAT test prep class that they need to get that STEM program, to get that scholarship, to be like the first immigrant in their family, to like succeed and be awesome, that we'll celebrate. So those are just things that I think we kind of need to grapple with. And the whole mental health. Like no kid is gonna, okay, I don't want to say no kid, but I think you're hard pressed to find a minority, Asian or otherwise, who's gonna be like, Mom, I think I'm a little anxious and depressed. And I'm gonna need to see someone at the awesome Brookline Community Mental Health Center, which we do have, and they have a sliding scale and all that good stuff. But you're not gonna find that. Or if they were even to have the courage to say that to their parent who may not speak English is gonna be like, are you crazy? Then we look like the crazy people in our family, and Aunt so-and-so is not gonna go with that. So like just these things you need to be aware of, and to do what you can. Like you're so awesome. Like I love libraries. Like I was like, well, the library asked me to do something with them. Like I love the library. You know, and Nadia, like their program is amazing, and I worked with some of your social workers with kids. But I guess just to really think.
I just want to explain one thing, because I think I do understand what you're saying, but I don't want you to misinterpret one thing.
Oh, yeah.
Remember, I'm talking about these particular parents.
Right.
Remember, James had parents who worked all the time.
Right.
Who would, I wasn't at all addressing income inequality or that kind of thing, where they were working themselves to the bone for them, and in fact, he rejected everything they were. He wiped them out of his life to never even talk about it. He was so ashamed of them. And he brought all his own that into a new house, and instead, when they did have time for their kids, they couldn't give to their kids because they both had rejected their own backgrounds.
Right.
So
I think you made your point too.
Yeah, no,
I think you got it. I just wanted to give the two of you, if you have any parting thoughts, because we're going to, this has been a really rich conversation, and I didn't, Robin or Nadia, do you want to?
I just wanted to thank you, I believe your name is Judy, for saying a word earlier. You said invisible. And I think often, you know, students who have difference, right, feel like they're invisible. And so I think that's it. If we can help combat that, about having students feel like they belong, that they are part of, that they matter, then yes, then we can get to the mental health stuff, right? We can get to how to celebrate who they are and what their families bring, whether or not their family's coming to a parent night, right, or able to really communicate with a teacher articulately in English. I think it's about having students feel like they belong.
I'll just kind of reaffirm what we are as a library, you know, definitely as a space, definitely as a place for anyone to come. And I will say, as much as I talk about the great benefit of books and stories, the other thing we provide here is simply the space. I mean, there are so many teens that I know just because I see them every day. And I don't question what they're doing. I don't interrogate them about whether they're doing their homework. I don't ask them what they're reading all the time. I just notice that they're here and that they need sanctuary. And that's what we give them. And I would never demand of a child that they have to participate in an exact way to be in the library. And yet, at the same time, I'm certainly very willing to talk to them if they would like to talk to me. And I try to be present as often as I can so that they know that I'm an ally. And I think that's what all of us are working towards, is being an ally to any young people that need it. And I think all of what we're talking about is finding the support systems so that even if you do have a chillier family environment, for example, or any of these things, that you can find another way to get support. It may not be the classic way, it may not be the expected way, but that's all anyone can use is another way to get a sense of acceptance and a sense of that you will be okay.
So I wanted to thank everybody. I wanted to start by thanking our panelists and Liz for doing such a beautiful job. From the audience, which is how do we keep this, discussion going? So October is really the month for Brookline Reads. This conversation will continue in some form or fashion when Celeste Ng comes at the end of the month, October 27th, to Pierce. But also, one of the real goals of the Brookline Reads program is to foster a sense of community and to promote community discussions. So, as much as we can, encourage your neighbors, encourage others to read the book, and so that we can keep this really vibrant dialogue that we've started here tonight going and broaden it throughout the community. So thank you all very much for coming, and thank you so much for participating in our program.